So my name is Pea Flower Tomioka, or PK, depending on which side of the documenting paperwork I'm currently going through to legally change my name you want to fall. Either are appropriate. Most people just call me Pea, like a sweet pea. And today we are going to talk about essentially unlearning toxicity. The bill here is that it is in regards to like improving our magical work and making those things stronger. But the reality is that when we do this kind of work that I'm going to be discussing today, the natural outcome of that is stronger everything, stronger magic, stronger relationships, stronger trust in yourself, stronger connection to the world around you, stronger understanding of the struggles of other people who don't necessarily look, feel, or act like you do. Like you could choose to focus on this kind of work for magical gain, but really magical gain is just kind of a byproduct of this kind of work. If that makes any sense. I like it when things connect. So all right, so I have a whole ton of papers here, and I'm very, very, very neurodiverse. I do not have a neurotypical brain at all. So there's going to be a lot of like tangents and ADDs and bouncing around. And this is as organized as I can get. I can send a copy of this, which honestly is not terribly well formatted either, if I'm going to be truly honest. I can send a copy of this if you guys want to have it like on record, or if anybody wants the resources in here, because there are links and stuff for more information. So let's just dive right in.
Yeah, and you can also put it on the files at What's Up at CUUPs too.
That's what I meant. I should have clarified. But yeah, I do have this as a PDF. I can upload it, and all of the little links that are in the paperwork are, you know, linkable. So cool. Oh. Does Joe have, no, Joe has to be back in a minute. Okay, so basically, when people ask what the most important aspect of magic workings are, the answers you get are pretty varied. A lot of people will say that trust comes first, and others will say that communication is key. Other people still will come in and chime in that the answer is honesty. And all of these, of course, are really, really key, very highly important for magical workings and healthy and safe practices. But we often overlook the foundation of where all of those kinds of things are built. So when my clients ask me this question, my answer is always the same: boundaries. Boundaries build trust. Boundaries are the soil that the roots of honesty grow in, and boundaries protect us in our professional lives, in our personal lives, in our emotional lives, and in our spiritual lives. As such, enforcing healthy boundaries is a vital step in improving the quality of each of these areas. So when I say it's a byproduct, you know, this kind of work that we're going to be discussing is improving your magical workings is a byproduct of that. It's because this kind of work is foundation stuff, okay? So let's do it. By learning to recognize which traits are damaging to the overall wellness of our being, we learn to more effectively enforce those boundaries. It's really easy to want to separate up the different areas of our lives into neat little boxes, but the natural result of that kind of compartmentalization is that we disconnect our empathetic response as we move from box to box. So a lot of people have difficulty with that, especially I noticed this a lot during like when COVID first kicked up and people had to start working from home. You lose that space between this is my morning routine and this is my work routine. People lost their commute and they could not adapt from waking up to going to work. And my recommendation for people who are struggling with that, because I worked from home already, was to create a different commute space. So go into your backyard for the length of your commute and have a cup of coffee and give yourself that space to adjust and breathe. It's the same concept, because we're compartmentalizing our lives. This is my time where I get ready for work, and this is my time where I drive to work, and this is the time where I do the work. And your brain processes the information of each of those boxes. So because we can't easily move between those boxes, our empathetic response changes as we compartmentalize those parts of our lives. It's a perfectly natural response, but when we're talking about boundaries and the empathetic response in general, when we continue to compartmentalize like that, it makes it harder to adapt. So does that make sense? Everybody good? Should I keep going? Okay. So we all want our spells to be stronger, and it's natural to focus on ways to improve the spell work itself. Maybe we get stuck in a cycle where we believe that the product we produce is powered by the tools that we use, which is a topic that we discussed the last time I presented here. And maybe you, as I often find myself doing, like to hyper focus on the works themselves, and then you fail to realize that powerful work doesn't come from, they are instead a direct result of the seemingly unrelated work. We aren't practicing to gain power. We are power because we gain practice. So, healthy boundaries lead to healthy lives. It really is a simple statement, but things that are simple aren't always easy. And learning to recognize toxic traits that everyone has within themselves can be a highly brutal process. This is a topic that people have devoted their lives to. Now, I'd like to point out that I am not a therapist. I am not a doctor. I am not a trauma counselor. What I am is a woman who's experienced a large amount of traumas in one lifetime, and I've done a lot of the legwork in my own personal life to drag those kinds of traumas out into sunlight to cleanse. So shadow work is an integral part of this process. And while this specific talk is not specifically about shadow work, it's all related. I've broken down the areas most common in our current lives to the different sections we're going to light upon, and I've done my best to provide links and more information if that's an area that you personally feel the need to focus on. This process, even just the talk itself, may become extremely intense for people, myself included. I want you to know that it's okay to feel uncomfortable, and it's okay if you need to step away. It's okay if you're not ready. It's okay to cry. I probably will too. The first step to healthy boundaries is to recognize where it is that you need to be safe. And that might mean that you choose to revisit this at a time that is more conducive for your own form of healing. Maybe you need to read this presentation as a document, jumping only to those areas that you choose to work from, and that's okay too. I want you to always do what is best for your emotional wellness, because we are going to, even if only briefly, cover things like, and consider this your trigger warning, guys, okay? Privilege, ableism, sexism, learned toxicity, abuse recovery, including systemic abuse, childhood abuse, rape, PTSD, trauma responses, etc. We're going to cover things like LGBTQ+ issues. We're going to cover issues about rights and awareness. We're going to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. All of it is connected. Okay. Couldn't just pick one trauma, could we, P? Just one? No. No, not how it works, guys. It's all
if you want to break this up into a class for each of those things, we can do that.
I would love to. I am not versed enough in every one of these issues to be able to host a class on them individually. I have dedicated the bulk of this to where most of my knowledge lies, and then I have lighted on information for the others and included resources for people to find voices that are more knowledgeable than mine, if that's the area that you need, okay? So, I lost my place. Let me look for the big PTSD because it's capital. There it is. Okay, PTSD trauma. I should not speak out loud when I think. I apologize. Okay, so we're going to be labeling a lot of the common abuse tactics so that we can more easily recognize when they're done to us and when we slip into those behaviors ourselves. And there's a litany of other highly uncomfortable topics happening here. So I will try to approach this as lighthearted but also as genuine as I possibly can. Because I like it deep, but I also like to laugh. So it's like good sex, guys. Deep and laugh. Anyway, I will be referring to a plot point from Picard. Not like geeks represent. Raise your hands. Any Trekkies in here? Thank you. Okay. I am going to be referencing plot points from Picard throughout this presentation with as minimal spoilering as possible in case you haven't already been there. So because art often imitates life, Star Trek has ever blazed the trail for humanity to move forward and grow to be better than we were the day before. So Picard, the show, not the captain, well, also the captain, but I mean the show, gives us the format to do the work that we're going to be learning about today by introducing us to the CUUP Milat. Does anybody remember the CUUP Milat?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Okay. Awesome. They are a mostly female sect of warriors from Romulus who are basically the counter to the Tal Shiar. If you don't know who the Tal Shiar is, that's okay. I'm not going to go into like a massive Star Trek background. What you need to know is basically if the Tal Shiar are the bad guys, then the CUUP Milat are the good guys. It's never that black and white in Star Trek, but you know what I mean. So anyway, the CUUP Milat value what they refer to as absolute candor. And it is essentially a pure response. There are no hidden emotions, and no one presents themselves other than anything but as they are. They raised a boy into their sect, and as an adult, this guy joins with Captain Picard and his crew. So we get to witness on the big screen this rare treat as he is depicted both as this powerful, amazing warrior and this vulnerable, frightened boy from scene to scene. He doesn't hide how he feels. He allows himself to experience or express the truth of his emotional state in every state, mourns and cries unashamed, laughs without fear of judgment. He knows that it is his vulnerable nature that provides his strength, and witnessing that on screen in a world where toxic masculinity still overshadows most of television writing tropes, it's really a beautiful thing to watch. So if you haven't seen Picard, that is like a hell of a good reason to do it.
The Romulan Darkagnon. The Romulan Darkagnon from the
so
Three
true.
Musketeers.
Yeah, I love Space Legolas. He's amazing. So, all right. So, lost my place. So it's that concept that of absolute candor, that absolute truth, that is going to be key to unlocking path towards unclouding your life. The only way out is through, so let's just get into it. I won't cover a topic without also be able to back you up and provide at least one resource for you to learn more and heal from or feel supported as you choose to grow. I'm someone who is very deeply and heavily involved in advocacy for safe practices during BDSM play. I was involved massively in that in the DC scene for over 10 years. It is core to my being. Therefore, it is vital to provide a space of supportive, loving care after a session that can be traumatic. This may be that for you, and it is my job to make sure that you have the resources that you need to further support what you are going through and find some closure and find a pathway out of how you may feel about those things, okay? If you do not feel that my resources have done this for you, please say something. Please reach out. I will help you find what you need. This is no different than that approach. I refuse to dive into these waters, even if only for a few feet, without making sure that you have a life jacket. So the first list of groupings that I have on here, and I can't see, but the first set of links in this is a list of hotlines around the world, including those specific to the LGBTQ plus community, like the Trapper Project. It's a Wikipedia link, and honestly, it was extensive, seriously cool stuff. All right, so we're gonna dive straight into our first topic, which is abuse recovery. This is the largest topic I'm covering today, and it is the bulk of what this particular talk is about, this particular presentation is about. It is also the bulk of my knowledge. Like, this is the place where I have the most knowledge of the topics we're discussing. This is by and large the biggest, the hardest, the most overlapping, tangled mess of reasons why boundaries and emotional regulation are so difficult for so many people, and it's where we're going to start today. Often, but not always, the other areas clouding our ability to seek absolute candor are rooted in abuses that we have not been given the proper tools to deal with. It's getting dark in here and it's hard for me to read. I'm going to rotate so that my light is better. If you come from abuse, as unfortunately many of us in the pagan community and the LGBTQ community do, then you know that comes with traits that are toxic. They're learned traits that are toxic. It doesn't mean that you yourself are abusive. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means that you have learned to respond to various abusive situations in an equally abusive way. You haven't learned to recognize it or how to rebuild that area in a healthier way. Those kinds of learned traits, especially when they're rooted in abuse, are called fleas, just like the animal, F-L-E-A-S. The name comes from how when you lie down with dogs, you get fleas, meaning that coming from abuse has taught you to respond in inappropriate ways. More recently, to help unmask the concepts that come as you begin to unlearn these traits after abuse, fleas can also stand for frightening, lasting effects of abuses. Fleas are the gut punch responses that we have when we feel threatened, and they usually lead to the one or more of the key tropes of responses to abusive situations, which you may have heard before are fright, flight. I have it flight twice here. It's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Is everybody familiar with all four of those? Okay. The fight response is the one that leads you coming back to the situation at hand aggressively. And the flight response, people flee the situation to find other means of avoidance. Freeze responders do exactly that. They'll just freeze up, unable to respond to the attack or the situation. And fawners respond to the aggressor of the situations by neglecting themselves and always putting the other party's emotional needs first, even to the point of lying and saying that a boundary the aggressor may have crossed is totally fine. Spoiler alert, it's not fine when people cross your boundaries. Some common flea-based responses are, and we're going to cover two of the big ones. Darvo. Anybody heard of Darvo? Yeah, couple. High five. This is the one that makes your head go, oh my God. Okay, like the first time you get this one, it is a light bulb, epiphany, come to Jesus moment. And we're a pagan group, so that's impressive, okay? So.
Come to Odin moment.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna have a come to Odin moment. DARVO is an acronym. It stands for deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. This happens a lot with abusers, a lot. It is an extremely common tactic that those with fleas unknowingly use to regain the upper hand in an argument. Here's an example of it so you can better recognize it when it happens if it's done to you, or if you're doing it. We're going to cover both approaches. You're confronting a family member who did something hurtful towards you, and they may respond with, "What? I never said that." Deny. "You're always making up such outrageous lies." Attack. "How dare you treat me this way after everything that I've done for you?" Reverse, victim, and offender. Now, your family member is in charge of that situation, and you are the person who has attacked them. How dare you say these things? It gives them the upper hand emotionally. So now you're feeling horrible because they've taken what should have been a simple boundary reinforcement and turned it into a way to keep your needs secondary to their feelings. You may do this without meaning to. Let's say someone wasn't as supportive of you as you needed, and that person reaches out for support themselves, okay? You might find the need to stand up and say how much you're hurting too, and remind your friend how unsupportive they were of you. The problem here is that just because someone else may have not been able to support you in a moment, twisting things around and attacking them for reaching out for support is manipulative. It implies that your hurt is more important than their hurt. The most common way that this takes place is by failing to acknowledge your role in healthy communication, by not addressing how your friend crossed a boundary to begin with. Instead, by waiting until they themselves are in distress. That counts as the first mark of DARVO. is you deny your responsibility to that conversation. Maybe you say, I needed help with fixing X thing a few weeks ago and you couldn't be bothered to help me. So you've got some nerve asking for help now. Why should I go out of my way to help you through this thing when you couldn't be bothered to help me? That's still Darvo. It's the same pattern. It's what happens when we feel threatened or we're unable to process a healthier way to deal with the situation themselves. And here's how you resolve it. You have to be willing to recognize that everybody falls into this pattern eventually. Nobody is free of toxic traits. Even if you didn't come from a background of abuse, there are learned toxicity traits in all of us. It is human nature, and our job is to find them and weed them out. You have to be willing to recognize that everyone falls into this pattern eventually, even if it's deeply ingrained and you come from abuse. You cannot use that as an excuse. You're still held to a human standard, and that standard is kindness. Often, people struggling to overcome from abusive situations go through a period that can only be described as selfish. It doesn't mean that you're actually selfish, although repeated instances of situations like this left unprocessed and unaddressed will lead to others labeling you that way. It's a pretty natural response. So when it's done to you by an abuser, the best response is no response. Engaging with an abuser will lead to more abuse and a greater punishment down the line. When it happens to someone who has learned this as a negative response, the best method is to try and explain why their response is inappropriate at that time and suggest that the parties involved attempt to resolve the conflict. This opens the door for both healing and for further flee-based responses depending on the person and the situation. And the only thing that you can do is be patient and try. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Everybody is healing at different rates. Everybody responds differently. And we're not here to learn every single person's responses in advance. We're here to learn to start recognizing what behaviors are holding us back as individuals. And Darvo is one of those things that makes people that have big light bulb moments when they're able to see it for the first time, when they see it for what it is. It's one of those ones where people get excited to find that, yes, there is a word for that. You are not crazy. It happened. Here's what it's called. I felt that way the first time I learned the term gaslighting. So when you yourself have Darvoed someone else, it's important to correct yourself as soon as you're aware that you've done the behavior. If you're engaging with an abuser as a form of self-defense, stop immediately. We do not recover from or escape from abuse by playing their games. If you've done it to someone else, say so. It's okay to say, I'm sorry. I responded defensively, and that was inappropriate and hurtful of me. It's okay to say, it's not your fault that I got defensive, and I will do my best to correct that behavior. And it's okay to say, thank you for being patient with me. That is a huge mark in what we need to recover. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay if you have fleas as long as you're working to overcome them. It's okay to be honest about where your fleas come from, but you can't use it like an excuse. To say, oh, I come from a broken home, I was abused as a child. That's not a reason that you get to act like an asshole. You are responsible for owning your kindness. There are many ways that the denial stage of Darvo can present itself, and learning to recognize them will help you start to sort out when it's happening to you or even when you are doing it yourself. Examples may sound like minimization. It wasn't that bad. Outright denial or gaslighting. That never happened. Amnesia. I don't remember doing that. Redefinition. I have a bad temper, so you shouldn't be upset with me. Projection. You're abusive and controlling. You hurt me. Conversion. I did wrong, but I'm a changed person and I won't do it again. That only works if you actually back it up, y'all. So we are, each of us, individually responsible for our own actions. And while they may stem from abuse, which is never the victim's fault, you are still responsible for learning to overcome those negative traits. Let's talk about another one. Triangulation. Does anybody know what triangulation is? Yeah. You and I, we're gonna talk. Amanda, I see you. Triangulation is a method of gaining an advantage over a perceived rival by manipulating them into conflicts with each other. Some people have a tendency to view or judge themselves in terms as to how much they see themselves in competition with other people, and that behavior, like Darvo, happens with both abusers and people who have fleas as a result of abuse. That competitive win or lose attitude occasionally turns malevolent and will lead the person who suffers from the personality disorder trait to seek ways to sabotage, manipulate, or otherwise undermine the position of others whom they see as a potential threat. One of the ways that they do this is to attempt to steer those that they regard as a threat into a confrontation with another person. This is a passive-aggressive divide and conquer approach, which makes use of a proxy rather than generating direct conflict with the target. And when it works, the individual gets a feeling of control, superiority, or gratification from gaining control and lowering the social status of the rival. This also has the effect of making a person appear more vulnerable to be more directly controlled by the abuser. So they basically copied that one right out of the textbook, which I linked under the section about triangulation. And some examples of triangulation include a woman lying to a friend claiming that another friend doesn't like her. Ladies, don't be that lady. A partner showing favoritism to one child, creating a rivalry between the children. A woman who flirts with a coworker in front of her boyfriend. A boss who tells a subordinate that the others don't respect him. All of that is triangulation. What it feels like when that happens to you, if you experience triangulation, you may fear what other people are thinking about you. You may feel humiliated, concerned with your own self-prerogative or your projective. You may feel the urge to reclaim or clear your name or set the record straight. And you may want to confront the people involved or even retaliate. However, by doing that, you've taken the bait. That's the whole point. They want you to do that. It makes you look like the crazy person, and they walk away scot-free, sowing their chaos into your life. I hate them so much. Like everybody just, I know who you think, I don't know the people, but I know everybody's got somebody in their head right now. Just take a moment, let them go, okay? Okay, how you cope with those feelings when you feel like with that divide and conquer attack, it's important to remember that you have control over what you do, not what the other people are doing or saying. As the adage says, nobody can make you feel inferior without your permission. Here's what not to do, and it's really hard not to do it, okay? So we're gonna go right back up to that part where I told you it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to forgive yourself, but here's the don't do it list, okay? Do not believe everything you are told by a person who suffers from this kind of behavior. They may just be telling you this false information as a means to an end. Don't react quickly to surprising news. You have a prerogative, you have the right to sit and think about it for as long as you want to before you decide to react, with whom and how. That's boundary right there, placing that boundary. I'm not ready to discuss this yet. I need to think about it first. End of conversation. Triangulation stops dead in its tracks. Don't lose your temper or lose control of your emotions. P. Don't lose your temper. P. Found my trigger, didn't I? So, you cannot control other people, but you always have control over your own word and your own actions, and that is where you have the most power. Do not sit and allow someone to rain down an insult upon you or criticism in the name of another person. If the room is a painful place to sit, you have the right to leave it. Also, and this doesn't get said enough, it's not on my workbook, I'm just going to say it to you now. No is a complete sentence. You do not owe anyone any explanation for why you choose to do the things you do as a functioning adult. Do not make promises, commitments, or contracts that will hurt your relationship with people whom you trust, you love, or people whose company you enjoy. Old friends and trusted relatives, no one who truly loves you will want to take a healthy, a supportive, a positive relationship away from you. So here's what you do instead. Objectify and verify anything that you are told before acting upon it. Keep in touch with those you love and trust and tell them about any problems or issues you might be having. Maintain a healthy balance between friends, family, work, and play. You need all of them in right measures to achieve that healthy balance and maintain healthy boundaries. Positively refuse to engage in the divide and conquer behavior without starting a fight about it. Remove yourself from conversations if they are unhealthy or dysfunctional. And maintain your self-control. That is how you keep your power for yourself and demonstrate that you are not going to be manipulated in that way. So these are only two of literally dozens of common flea-based responses. Because we don't have all night, I'm only doing two. But I have given you a link to find out information about a lot more. To learn more, please visit insert link here. There is a glossary of terms on a website called Out of the Fog. If anybody's familiar with it, it's amazing. For people who are coming out of the fog, FOG is another acronym. It stands for fear, obligation, and guilt. It is the process that you go through as you are coming out from under abuse. It is horrifying and deeply, deeply traumatic. Okay, this is a vital website for anyone hoping to better understand what happens to people as they begin to overcome long-term abuse, especially systemic abuse or childhood abuse. I use definitions from this site to aid in the explanation of both Darvo and Triangulation. All right, that covers our first and major topic. The next 2 pages just light on other areas that may or may not be areas that you need to focus on to unclutter your life. Next, we're going to talk about privilege. Anybody want to step out for a minute? It's going to make you uncomfortable. We're going to talk about your privilege. All right, confronting learned racism. How we use our privilege deeply and directly impacts. I'm sorry, did somebody ask me a question? No? Thought I heard somebody talk. Okay.
I'm sorry.
How we use our. Oh no, it's okay. Did you need something? Because I need a drink of water, so we're gonna do that. Take a water break. Cheers. All right. How we use our privilege directly impacts the world around us, and how we interact with the world around us directly impacts how we do magical workings. They are connected. Digging deeply into yourself to unlearn traits that are built into an inherently unfair system is a vital part of understanding how to better be an ally, how to better be a human, and how to better be a version of yourself than you are right now. To be a better version of yourself than you are right now. Not that you aren't lovely. So some of the things that we inherently take for granted are built into a system that is designed to hold one or even more races of people as higher than others. So by addressing those truths and accepting that we have a responsibility to understand our history of our own society's deliberate cruelty, we better the society as a whole so that everyone can try to move forward to something greater or better together. I'm not as well versed as I would like to be in this area at this present time, specifically, and I am doing the best that I can to learn more and help others do the same so that we can all be better allies for the, I'm not sure how to say this word, the BIPOC community. I've only seen it written, do people say biopic? I'm not sure, but it's Black, Indigenous, and people of color is what that stands for, that community. It's work that matters, and it's important to note that starting the journey is extremely traumatic. It's going to hurt. And I still hear the elder in the never-ending story telling Atreyu that it has to hurt if it's to heal, and she's absolutely right. Confronting learned racism is a deep, intense, and worthy work. So I have added a link of amazing books to get you started specifically on that process. Personally, as I have already done them myself, I can highly, highly recommend White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which frankly should just be required reading in every school. There's also another link here with a list of organizations that you can choose to support, lots more books and more context from the BIPOC community for people who are as white as we are to learn and grow from that. Also, extremely important, if you are interested in joining a messenger group specifically for white folks or people who present as white, to support one another as we work through these things, because your feelings matter too, but we don't need to be burdening the BIPOC community as we unlearn these traits. It's a traumatic process enough for them. They don't need our drama as we work through that stuff. However, your feelings are valid, and working through that is important. So it's important that we support each other as we move forward towards a greater goal. If you're interested in joining a group like that, message me privately. I've created a space called Confronting Learned Racism, and there's a bunch of us working through that shit. All right. Let's talk about ableism. Some of the things we consider wasteful might be a vital resource for someone else when a grocer sells oranges that are already peeled rather in the segmented package rather than in just sort of like the actual orange. The neurotypical community frequently misunderstands the neurodiverse community and vice versa. People with invisible illnesses fight silent battles just to function every day in the world around them, often with little to no support from the medical community. Ableist behaviors are all around us every single day, and learning to recognize them in yourself is an excellent way to improve your interactions with the communities you support. And when you improve interactions with the communities you support, you improve relationships with the people you love. And when you improve your relationships with people, you improve your relationships with yourself. When you improve your relationship with yourself, your magic improves. All connected, it all matters. I have some links here. That was very short. Some of these sections are very short. And then I have 2 different links here where you can learn about the common language used in ableist language, which is totally a thing. It can be accidentally hurtful to others, like when people say barren. You know, oh, I'm barren. Well, you know, maybe that's not the best word to describe a woman who is infertile. It's a hurtful way to put it. This is one example of hundreds of these words. There's a whole glossary that I've linked to. You can also learn more about what ableism looks like from one of these links. It goes straight to the accessliving.org website, which is far more knowledgeable than I am, which is why I'm providing these resources for you. I'm glossing over these, like I said before, just to retouch. Like, it seems like, why are we talking about this? We're talking about it because everybody has an area of their lives where maybe they go, oh shit, maybe I should do more about that. So maybe one of these is, not all of these have to resonate for you. Maybe one of them will. And I want you to take that and find those resources and improve your status as a being of yourself. Because when you improve yourself, you improve everything around you, your magic grows. Sexism. Sexism, obviously, still very much a massive problem in the world today. I've linked to a really excellent article to aid about any of those who may wish to understand it better and how to combat it. We're not going to go into sexism today because otherwise P will be pulling her hair out and there will be a lot of rage. This is an area that I need work on controlling my responses for. So obviously we've only lighted on a few of these specific issues, and the bulk of the work that needs doing for self-improvement starts within by recognizing what areas you personally may have gaps in. I've done heavy work into overcoming systemic abuse, but my work in unlearning racism has only just begun. I have years of experience fighting within a racist, or excuse me, within a sexist, ableist system, but I am still learning more about my own neurodiversity and how to recognize when I need to allow myself a difficult method to complete a neurotypical task with my neurodiverse brain. So maybe you need to learn how to forgive yourself, or maybe you need to learn how to better support your community, or maybe you need to learn how to recognize abuse or when you have conditioned response to it. But how does all of this improve my spell work? Look, I even adjusted it right there, see? Your words are only as powerful as your knowledge. That's why it matters. Your words are only as powerful as your knowledge, and knowledge is power. So by breaking down the walls that cause disconnect from various struggles happening around you, you also break down the walls to understanding that struggle. So if we freely can embrace the absolute candor of ourselves when we learn to find the areas that we may need to improve upon, then we make the free exchange of love even easier to share. Isn't that kind of the point? I think so. And that's what leads to stronger workings. Loving ourselves, supporting our communities, holding our personal conduct to a level that lifts others up with us is the foundation of work for having healthy boundaries. Confronting these things is never easy, and it's okay to go slow. It's okay. It's okay to go slow. I just lost my place. Nobody could possibly tackle all of these different issues at one time. So choose what you need and ease yourself in and do the work that needs work. All of these works matter, yes, but ignoring them is a mark of your privilege. It's not okay. It's a privileged mark, ticking a box for limiting love. Your love should be limitless. Your empathy is limitless. Your creativity is limitless, and your compassion for your compassion is also limitless, but that's not what the sentence says. It's important. Your compassion is limitless, but your capacity for change is limitless. And all of these things form your magical power, and it's why each individual is beautiful. It's also why each individual's voice should be able to be heard. No matter if you learned toxicity from abuse, from sexism, from learned racism, from ignorance, from ableism, it's never too late to try again. There's absolutely no shame in not being perfect as a human being. We are all in this plane of existence to grow and be more than what we came from. And the strength and vulnerability, the strength needed to confront those things within ourselves, that's where magic is born. When we embrace our vulnerability as a strength, that's where our magic comes from. That's where all of your magical ability ties into the strength of your works, and that's why it matters. The end.